The U.S. has released its latest national security strategy, saying deterring a conflict over Taiwan is a priority. It says preserving the U.S.'s military superiority is needed to achieve that. The document noted increased focus on Taiwan for its critical role in semiconductors. It also says that the U.S. does not support unilateral changes to the cross-strait status quo. Instead, it calls for working with regional allies to ensure that the U.S. can always defend Taiwan. It's the first national security strategy document released since 2022. For more on what the new strategy could mean for U.S. engagement in the region, our reporter Lery Hiciano spoke to Bryce Barros, an associate fellow at the think tank Globsec.
What are your high-level thoughts on the new national security strategy? Do you think that this represents some sort of shift in U.S. policy towards Asia and the Indo-Pacific region?
Yes, I do think it's a bit of a high-level shift on U.S. policy in Asia broadly. I think specifically where the national security strategy mentions Taiwan, specifically under the deterring military threats subsection, it really doesn't focus on ways that it partners with Taiwan in a military way other than wanting to ensure that Taiwan is important because of its semiconductor production, but also given its own geography across the so-called First Island chain. So I think that that's actually pretty significant into itself to mention that. I do think that it does allow for a lot of ambiguity about what U.S. actions would be for that, other than trying to deny China's ability to want to seize Taiwan or try to get a foothold on any of the islands in the First Island chain. So the way to sort of do that is to keep an eye on what's happening going forward related to bilateral exercises or multilateral exercises here in the Indo-Pacific. So if you continue to see those exercises and interactions sort of maintain their balance and ramp up, I think that's a lot more telling than some of the more ambiguous language that you have in the actual national security strategy unto itself.
A few months ago, in the lead up to APEC, there was some concern that Taiwan could be seen as some sort of political bargaining chip between Trump and China while he sought out some sort of trade deal. Do you think the strategy assuages those concerns or addresses those concerns?
I don't know if the strategy necessarily gets into that at all, right? And there's been a lot of omission within the strategy that talks about the nuts and bolts of how it will work with Taiwan. But I do think that some of the things that you're starting to see so far show that the Trump administration is not necessarily viewing Taiwan, or at least using it as a bargain chip.
How does this national security strategy differ from previous ones? This is the first in 3 years and the first in President Trump's second term.
I think the biggest difference, so if you're looking at this national security strategy versus ones that you've seen for previous, like the Biden administration, for example, where the Biden administration put a really strong advocacy on democracy, right? There's not a whole lot of mention of human rights, democracy, and whatnot in the context of this national security strategy. And within the context of China, right? So Hong Kong, Xinjiang, all those other, like transnational repression. So in that sense, at least on the Indo-Pacific policy related to China, it is a bit of a departure. However, I do think that there is a decent amount of stuff that provides a nod to wanting to work with allies and partners, which issues has the administration chosen to speak up about, done actions against, like, for example, sanctions or military exercises or things along those lines. I think that that's a key thing to sort of keep an eye out for when thinking about the actual implementation of this national security strategy versus previous ones.
That was Bryce Barros, an associate fellow at Globsec.